You have to learn to have patience. Never go ahead of God. Always wait on the Lord. The Israelites wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. 40 years. So I tell people, man, just because you may be dealing with a certain addiction, you may be in bondage, you may be struggling with a certain stronghold, you may be dealing with mental health, do not give up, because God will never give up on you. 40 years? The Israelites wandered for 40 years. I'm 41. There's things that God just delivered me from, because sanctification is a lifelong journey. So it's not like, oh, I'm saved now, everything falls off of me. Sometimes that happens, but other times there's things that you have to be rewired. That's why the Bible tells us in Romans 12:2, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Because God knew that we were going to have to renew our mind. Because, man, when you're in Egypt, and we all know Egypt represents bondage, if you're in Egypt for all of that time, come on, man, when it's time to get to the promised land, we're like, man, I got to renew my mind. And a friend of mine brought something to my attention about the Israelites. You know, there were millions of Israelites that were walking shoulder to shoulder. They were traveling, and God used Moses to deliver them out of Egypt, you know, from Pharaoh and the Egyptians. But you have to understand, once they left Egypt, some of them still wanted to go back to Egypt because that mindset hadn't been changed yet. It's like being a slave for so long, and then when they say you're free, you're like, all I know is slavery, right? Okay, so the thing that my friend told me that was mind-boggling to me, it blew me away, the typology of the Israelites being delivered from Egypt. They're traveling with Moses, and they had kids. Well, the kids that were born were the ones that went into the promised land. They didn't have Egypt in them. So it was almost like the typology of it is that when you're born again, you now can enter into the promised land because you're clean, right? But like all of those Israelites, they came out of Egypt in that mindset. They weren't renewing their mind. In fact, they were putting themselves in more bondage. You know what I'm saying? They were sinning, they were corrupted, they were deceived because they had been worshiping Egyptian gods and false gods and the golden calf. So, you know, you got to get rid of the idols. That's a word.